Oh, a warm welcome from everyone. John Green, welcome in Munich.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here.
How difficult was it to think into this world?
Not very difficult, weirdly, because I'm not sick, and I'm not 16, and I'm not a girl. But her voice was very specific to me, and it felt very clear to me, and I didn't know if it was right. I didn't know if she sounded like she was 16, or she sounded like a girl, or she sounded like she was sick. I didn't know any of that, but I knew that this voice was very strong to me, and it felt like the right tone for the story to me, and so I just kind of stuck with it. And I never really had any trouble. I don't know if I pulled it off, but like, other than my wife telling me that the clothes were all wrong, yeah, I just kind of stayed true to that voice that I had access to. It was difficult for the first 8 years trying to write it, and then I wrote the first sentence. I remember I was in a coffee shop in India, not like a Dutch coffee shop, but a cafe in Indianapolis, and I was trying for the millionth time to write this story, and I had like 5,000 words written, and I deleted them in a fit of anger. And then I wrote the first sentence late in the winter of at the time it was 16th, late in the winter of my 16th year, my mother decided I was depressed, presumably because I rarely left the house, spent quite a lot of time in bed, read the same book over and over, ate infrequently, and devoted quite a bit of my abundant free time to thinking about death. And I wrote the period at the end of the sentence, and I was like, oh, finally. And Hazel never really left me after that. Like, I felt like she was always with me.
Also hat alle Vorbestellungen in den USA von diesem Buch persönlich signiert, 150.000 Stück. Took how long?
About 2 months, 2.5 months.
Why and how was that?
It was kind of fun. It's a lot easier than writing. I just listened to audiobooks and watched TV. I watched a lot of football, a lot. I watched like 6 hours of football every Saturday and Sunday. That was great. I did it because I promised I would do it. I wasn't happy about it. Like, I wouldn't do it again, certainly. But when I promised I would do it, my idea was that there are all these people who live very far from cities in the United States, and all those people have no opportunity to get a signed book, ever, because authors don't go to, like, South Dakota. And so I thought if I just signed the whole first printing, everybody who wants a signature will get a signature, and also it would kill the market for my autograph. Like, I hated going on eBay and seeing my books for sale for like $400 because I had signed it. And yeah, and I figured it would be like 20,000, which is what most of my print runs were, all of my print runs were before, and that's not so long, that's like 6 days. But it was much more. So, but then I had already made the promise, and you can't break the promise, so I signed them.
When did you start writing? Writing as an author, as a novelist, not as a child.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. I mean, seriously, like during the time I was a hospital chaplain, and I guess maybe the year before that, my last year of college, I started to get really interested in fiction writing. I always wanted to be a writer of fiction. I always had this idea that I would be a novelist, but I never wrote very much. I just liked...
Interesting concept.
Yeah. No, I just pictured, I liked it turns out I don't like the life at all, but I thought I would like the life, like the... I thought like Kurt Vonnegut seemed to have a really good life to me, and even like after he tried to commit suicide, I was like, he's really happy. And he would insist in his books that he was miserable, and I would be like, no, you're not. You're happy. You have a great life. But then I started to write seriously when I was a chaplain. I think I was trying to process a lot of the things I was seeing and trying to kind of cope with it, and writing became a coping mechanism for me.
When you were the age of Hazel and of Gus, how were you then?
Yeah, not as cool as they are. I was pretty nerdy. You know, I still am, thank you. I feel very...
How do you call it? Ventriloquist?
Ventriloquist, yeah. I was also, I was nerdy, but I wasn't a very good student, which is not a great combination. I didn't apply myself as well as I should have, and also I think I was very scared of failure and scared of being exposed as not as smart as I thought I was. And I was also sort of, in retrospect, I think, a little bit depressive and anxious, which is a lot of what separated me from my peers. But I spent a lot of time watching them and thinking about them, and a lot of that has become very useful as a writer. I mean, I spent most of my teenage years sort of sitting on a couch talking to my friends, but most of what I was doing was kind of watching them and being fascinated by them, but feeling like I was sort of seeing a different species of person than I was.
Eigentlich war ein ziemlicher Nerd, aber ein Nerd ohne Erfolg in der Schule. Das muss man auch mal schaffen.
It's true.
Yeah, it's true. 20 kids? How old?
Oh, not that old, yeah. Not to brag.
But summer after 7th grade, so 13?
13.
Yeah. It didn't go any further than that. It's just the one. Then I had to wait another year till summer camp the next year. Then I had the second one.
So when it came to the time you had to choose what to actually learn, you decided to study theology? It's correct.
Yeah.
Why? Warum Theologiestudium?
Just seemed like a good way to make money. My understanding was that ministers were super rich. No, well, I mean, I started out studying Islam, early Islamic history, and but I myself am not a Muslim. I'm Episcopalian, Anglican, the Church of England, and I wanted to. I think what fascinated and fascinates me about religion and religious experience is that for almost all of human history, we have asked the biggest questions. The question of whether life has intrinsic meaning or whether we must construct meaning, the question of why suffering exists, the question of whether there is some kind of order in the universe. All those questions have traditionally been asked through the lens of religious traditions. Now we have these secular ways of asking the questions, but even though we have these secular ways, in a lot of ways, we still approach these questions with a bit of, I think in a similar way, because religious thought has for so long defined has defined philosophy. You know, it's been indistinguishable from philosophy. So I felt like I felt like it was a way for me to approach the big old questions with the big old people, you know, and it was, and in many ways it still is, you know. I mean, I still very much look to thinkers like Dietrich Bonhoeffer when I'm thinking about meaning and in my own life and how what decisions I should make in my own life.
You broke it? You stopped it? Why?
Yeah. Well, it turns out that being really interested in something is not the same thing as you should do it as a job.
Man muss sein Hobby nicht zum Beruf machen.
Yeah, exactly. So I am still really interested in religion, and I still go to church quite often, not all the time, but sometimes. And I was talking earlier with a journalist, and I remembered something I hadn't thought about in a long time, which is that intellectually I had all of these ideas about why the universe either is totally random or appears to be totally random. Like, it looks as if the universe is completely indifferent to us. Like, the universe does not care about us, at least based on everything that we have observed so far. That problem, I had all kinds of intellectual reasons, with the help of thinkers like Bonhoeffer and Paul Tillich and mostly Germans. For how religion is still relevant in my life and still important and yada yada yada. But when I actually encountered death in young people, and when I actually encountered this radical unfairness, this deep injustice that is outside of our control, I found it unbearable. And these intellectual ideas, while they are still legitimate to me, they just brought me no comfort.
You've had a lot of debate with Shakespeare. Why Shakespeare?
Yeah, I mean, Shakespeare just happens to be wrong a lot. I mean, he was the great... So Shakespeare, in English language literature at least, is... To say that he is like the greatest or most important writer in English is a dramatic understatement, right? Like, he is... There's no argument. There's not even a close second. There's not even like a... Yeah, no one ever fights about it the way they fight about whether Liverpool or Manchester United is the... Liverpool. So... I mean, it's easy to buy Premier League titles, but we won 18 of them. You've won like 4, and you bought 15. All right.
Das gibt für uns auch, FC Bayern ist richtig.
Yeah. So, yeah, right. Yeah, you are very much in my position. It sucks. It's very painful. What was I talking about?
Shakespeare.
Yeah, Shakespeare, right. So there is no equivalent debate, because Shakespeare is overwhelmingly the best writer that we've ever had in English. But, that doesn't mean that like every observation Shakespeare made should be treated as scripture. Or generally, like, I have a real problem when any work of art is treated as scripture. You know, art is flawed, and that's part of what makes it beautiful. And Shakespeare was wrong when he thought that all men are self-made. And Shakespeare was also wrong when he thought that his beautiful writing would in some way capture the life of the dead person, who to this day we know nothing about except that we think he was a guy. You know, like, people still even fight about whether he was really a guy. So, I mean, we know very, very little about this person. Yeah, so I guess I took him on in this book because I think he's wrong about those two things, but I do think that he's right about quite a lot. And it wasn't meant in any way as a dig or an attack. I do like Shakespeare.
Gegen die Symbole in den Büchern, ob die so zufliegen oder lange darüber nachdenkt, um solche Dinge zu entwickeln.
I think symbols that you brainstorm tend to be really obvious and therefore bad. Like, I mean, there are some things that the characters are conscious of constructing symbolically, like, for instance, Gus's cigarette, right? He says that's a metaphor, and it is a metaphor, and it is precisely a metaphor for the thing he says is a metaphor for. So it's okay to me that that symbol is obvious, because Gus says that it's obvious. But, like, if you're reading a book, I just finished Fahrenheit 451, very late, this book that we were all, our whole community was supposed to read this book together. Thousands and thousands of people read it, and me, the person who was most supposed to read it, didn't. But I did. I just finished it, and at the end of that book, this is not a spoiler, there has been significant destruction to the world. And at the end of the book, this is completely true, one of the characters says to the other characters, first, we need to build a mirror factory. Like a factory that makes mirrors. No! that is not the first thing that you do after the apocalypse. That's like the 7,000th thing that you do after the apocalypse. That is an example of a very obvious metaphor. It's so obvious that you have to assume that the character is kidding, right? He doesn't seriously think we should build a mirror factory. I don't like those symbols, right? Because it distracts from the story. I kind of laugh out loud, or when I read Ayn Rand, like, those aren't symbols to me, you know? Those are like road signs with flashing lights. Symbols work whether you're aware of them or not, right? Like, they work on you in some subtle, almost magical way, like in your guts. They like add to the guts of the story. So for me, they must be very organic. Like, so I don't brainstorm them, but I do look for them while I'm writing and then try to tease them out. So like, I do think about what's wrong with Hazel, this question of the water filling her lungs, and how else could we talk about the weird relationship that humans have with water, this thing that both makes life possible and also frequently kills people. How else can I look at that question, you know, instead of being like, oh, let us create a symbol now. Does that make sense?
Da hinten?
This is kind of morbid, but is it a little bit odd when you kill your own characters?
Also für die auf der Treppe Richtung Reiselektüre die Frage, ob es nicht irgendwo gemein und auch hart ist, wenn man die eigenen Hauptdarsteller tötet.
I've never killed anyone, and I don't want to. That sounds horrible. I don't think having characters die in your books is the same thing as killing them, any more than like having people die in your life is the same thing as killing them.
And if you already had it set out in the beginning, or does it just come as a sort of great part in the middle?
No. When you spend 10 years writing a book, there are not a lot of unplanned events on some level. Like, I mean, I don't know if it started like right from the beginning. It depends on how you define the beginning, I guess. But certainly before I wrote, you know, I mean, I knew by like 2003, maybe 2004, the overall shape of the novel. And with other of my books that involve death, he said, trying to avoid spoilers. That structure of that novel was there from its very conception, yes. So I never felt like I was killing anybody because they were, in my mind, you know, kind of already dead.
Because I was actually surprised that your book like had an end.
So did I think about ending my book in the middle of a sentence? Yeah, I mean, yeah, for like 5 minutes. It just seemed like it would be sort of just annoying. And I don't like us like showy. I mean, I feel like so that is based on a reading experience I had when I was a young person with the great novel Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace, which is also an infuriating novel that still haunts and angers me. And I think there is a contract, as Gus says, between the reader and the writer. And you have made this promise to give me your time and to give me your best effort to read the book as well as you can read it. And I, in return, should not be an ass to you. So, like, that was my hope.
Thank you very, very much.